So the most famous visually spectacle-driven filmmaker alive just made another film about alien contact. And guess what? It's forgettable. Let's sit with that for a second. After all, we're talking about the man who made an ordinary suburban father abandon his family because he couldn't stop carving a mountain out of his mashed potatoes. The director who made a generation cry over a dying creature in a closet. The artist who turned an alien invasion into one long panic attack. Safe to say that aliens are his home turf, and that he owns this. Yet somehow he made one movie that lands with almost no impact at all. No awe, no dread, no wonder. How the hell does this happen? How does the one filmmaker who should not be able to miss this target really miss it so badly? The answer is that there are two Steven Spielbergs. They have never been the same filmmaker, and this title made the mistake of hiring both of them at once. When they pull against each other, they simply don't combine. In fact, they erase each other. And as a consequence, a third Spielberg, the showman, the one who gives you that visual spectacle you actually buy the ticket for, never even walks through the door. And what we are left with is two halves of two different films that add up to about a quarter of one. But how do we end up with this weird taste in our mouths as soon as the credits start to roll? Well, that's what we're going to find out in this video. I'm Peter from Vinyl and Celluloid, and this is my review of Disclosure Date. Steven Spielberg and alien life have a history, and we can all agree that it's a good one. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T., War of the Worlds. 3 films, 3 completely different registers, and 3 successes. Wonder, warmth, and dread, and each one definitive. I'll leave the alien-adjacent Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull where it belongs, which is unmentioned. So, the expectation going into Disclosure Day was not whether Steven Spielberg could handle the subject. The only question was which Spielberg would turn up. The wide-eyed 70s dreamer that understood paranoia and magic, or the heavier modern post-9/11 moralist? The answer is both, and that's where the trouble starts. You see, the first version wants momentum and awe, the second wants gravity and restraint, and each one keeps stepping on each other, with David Koepp's thin script left holding a film that needed 3 filmmakers and got the friction of 2. This combination impacts every single aspect of the movie. But before we get into the specifics of what it got wrong, here's a usual quick recap. Disclosure Day follows Margaret Fairchild, played by Emily Blunt, a local weather presenter whose ordinary life comes apart when she's pulled into the biggest secret there is, proof that humanity is not alone. As Daniel Kellner, played by Josh O'Connor, tries to drag the truth into the open, Margaret gets swept into a conspiracy of alien contact, government secrecy, and a revelation that could change how the whole world sees itself. Now, this is a strong setup, right? An ordinary person, a world-changing event, the machinery of power trying to keep the lid on. On paper, this is Spielberg territory down to the ground. But on screen is a whole different matter. The best way to start decomposing or critiquing this movie is to start by the thing that's holding everything else up, and the first point where the movie fails, the screenplay. Disclosure Day is based on a Spielberg original story, but the adaptation into a full script is too self-important for its own good, and forgets the one move the filmmaker used to make better than anyone else, giving you a person to walk in with. I know I've already mentioned it, but think about Close Encounters. Richard Dreyfuss's Roy Neary is an ordinary, emotionally restless man hijacked by wonder. His life cracks open, his beliefs get shaken, and the Devil's Tower lands on him like a religious vision he doesn't understand, but feels. You don't need the mythology explained because you're inside one man's obsession. Spielberg's latest gives you none of that. Instead of a fleshed-out center, it hands you a clunky, on-the-nose science versus faith argument that belongs in an M. Night Shyamalan movie, not a Spielberg one. And it keeps reaching for an alien artifact, a MacGuffin it returns to again and again that produces the exact eye-rolling effect of the synchronizer sequences that sank Exorcist II: The Heretic. The film thinks the object is mysterious, but the audience just waits for it to stop. Then there's logic and the lazy way the film keeps rescuing itself. I mean, are we supposed to believe that a television broadcast somehow moves the entire world in 2026? Are we to believe that TV still works that way? Then there's the overall power cut at the station that kills all the lights, but somehow leaves the video uploads untouched. Something you notice in real time and is really off-putting. And every time the plot paints itself into a corner, a convenient device, a sudden signal, the artifact doing exactly what the scene needs arrives to solve it. So I found that the film leans too much on the Deus Ex Machina to the point where it stops feeling like a story and starts feeling like a series of problems the script keeps bailing itself out of. These aren't small things. They keep you from getting fully immersed and also prevent you from taking it half seriously. Some of the performances around Blunt take damage from the same script. Colin Firth, as the face of the official cover-up, is stranded in a register the film can't decide on. He's playing a cartoonish, broad, hand-rubbing obstructionist who'd be at home in a lesser thriller, but here he's in a movie that keeps insisting on its own seriousness everywhere else. Another example of the two Spielbergs' problem, shrunk down to a single performance. The great film and the silly film, fighting inside one character, and neither of which winning. If you go back again to the director's filmography, you'll find a stellar collection of examples where the visuals amplify the movie. Here, not the case. The visual effects are uneven in a way you don't expect from the director, and something that had already been flagged by the earlier trailers and overall promotional materials. The creature renderings are genuinely off-putting, more on that later. The action sequences are mediocre at best, and the CGI animals feel like they belong on a straight-to-DVD release. To wit, the whole thing looks less assured than a Spielberg film has any right to. But if we are to remain positive or see the silver lining among this mess, we can take comfort in the fact that the Jaws director has abandoned the plans for a Bullet remake, which, considering the large majority of car chase sequences, is truly something to be grateful for. The other issue I found with this movie is that, beyond pacing problems, there is an overall lack of imagination. It has been nearly 50 years since Close Encounters of the Third Kind got a release, and many other alien-related titles were shown to the audiences as well. This helps to aggravate the fact that the aliens in Disclosure Day are still the grayish figures with big black eyes. I mean, yes, you could argue that that's deliberate, a visual shorthand for exactly what the public expects aliens to look like in a real disclosure scenario. Maybe. But the fact is, the director who spent a career inventing how the impossible looks on screen, this never really reads as a choice, but rather as a regression. A filmmaker who used to reinvent the image settles for the imagery everybody already has in their head. And what stings the most is that we have the receipts. Again, if we go back to 1977's Close Encounters, we see that Spielberg didn't show you the aliens for most of the movie. He showed you the light, the mountain, and a man completely moved by what he didn't understand. He presented you with 5 notes and a wall of cloud, and a child walking away calmly towards the door, building the awe on your face before he ever revealed theirs. When the contact finally came, it landed because 2 hours of calm contemplation and teasing had earned it. He understood that wonder is something you withhold. E.T. did the same trick with warmth instead of awe. We can admit that the creature is frankly a little ugly, but it doesn't matter because the film makes you love it through a child's eyes before it properly asks you to. And 2005's War of the Worlds went the other way entirely and weaponized the same discipline, keeping the threat half seen, the horror in the reaction shots, and the camera locked to one terrified family instead of the spectacle above them. 3 titles, 3 completely different emotions, but one common method underneath all of them. Trust the audience, withhold the reveal, let the human face do the work. And Disclosure Day forgets every part of that. The aliens are shown relatively early and in a clear way. And worst of all, they're shown often. And as I mentioned, the design has really nothing new to say. And because there's no withholding, there is no awe to withhold. The title hands you the thing that masters of this genre, Spielberg included, spent decades teaching us, to keep just out of frame. And it clearly knows whose shadow it's standing in, because it keeps reaching back to the director's old work. There's the chase and road movie pulse of the likes of Duel, the Sugarland Express, and Catch Me If You Can, the technology versus empathy thread running through AI and Minority Report, and there are even nods to Poltergeist, the film that Steven Spielberg totally did not direct. The callbacks are affectionate and they are everywhere. But here, a callback is simply a reminder of a better film. And that's all they achieve here. They point at greatness in another room, but they never really bother to open the door. And yet, for a film this frustrating, Disclosure Day is not without real things to admire. And I would be dishonest if I didn't include them in this review, as they deserve their due before the verdict is finalized. Emily Blunt is incredible. She's kind of like the Spielbergian everywoman the script otherwise refuses to build, and the comparisons to Roy Neary are the most useful ones available. Neary worked because Spielberg started him as a nobody, a put-upon suburban dad, and let the surroundings do the rest. Blunt starts from a similar place, an ordinary professional whose ordinary life is the only stable thing she has, and then we get to watch it come apart in real time. But the difference is that Dreyfuss's character had the script built to carry him, and Blunt's character doesn't. She's holding up the emotional weight of the whole film on her own, with a screenplay that keeps handing her exposition no actor should be asked to make sound human. The cool thing is that she actually makes it sound human anyway. She does move through frustration, anxiety, and some flashes of comic relief, capping it all off with the very recognizable wish to simply not be the person this is happening to. There's a register she finds, the look of someone watching their own reality quietly rewrite itself and trying to stay functional through it. That is exactly the thing the film keeps reaching for everywhere else and missing. When Disclosure Day works at all, it's almost always because she's on screen. The actress gives the tired hero's journey shape a genuine shine, and she does it without the support the part needed. The craft around her holds up too. John Williams has scored Spielberg for over 5 decades. And the partnership is one of the most important ones in the history of American film. He's, after all, the man who taught audiences what awe sounds like, who can make a few notes feel like first contact. Here he gives the film a sincerity it has not remotely earned and refuses to apologize for it. The score does a lot of the heavy emotional lifting the script keeps fumbling, and at moments it almost convinces you the movie underneath is bigger than it is. You kind of have to admire a composer in his late 90s still propping up a film with pure conviction. Janusz Kamiński has been Spielberg's eyes for over 3 decades, and his fingerprints are all over the look of this thing. The blown-out light, the haze, the sense of the ordinary world being slowly invaded by something too bright to look at directly. He shoots Disclosure Day like a conspiracy thriller gradually flooding with religious awe. And there are individual transitions and images here that belong in a far better film. The man knows how to make light feel like a presence. He does it even when the screenplay gives him nothing worth lighting. Which is, in the end, the whole problem in one sentence. The performance, the picture, and the music are all making a better film than the story actually allows. It seems like everybody in the building did their job except the page. And for everyone who has grown up or been shaped by Spielberg's output, there's one more problem, and it's one that turns frustration into something closer to disappointment. Disclosure Day reaches for the oldest idea in the First Contact playbook, the universal language that lets us finally talk to whatever is out there, and it simply does nothing with it. We have seen this done and done far better, more than once. Contact built its whole spine on mathematics, prime numbers as the one thing any intelligence in the universe would have to share, and made that idea feel like true spectacle. Arrival went the other way and made language itself the bridge, turning the slow work of translation into the emotional core of an entire film. Both understood the same thing. The universal language angle only works if it costs the character something. Here, it is treated as a plot key, a lock to be picked so the story can move to the next beat. The single most profound moment imaginable, the instant humanity learns how to be understood, gets reduced to a puzzle the film is impatient to solve. And then we get to the empathy aspect, which is the strangest failure of all because this is one topic where Spielberg excels and never had to fake. In the 3 comparable examples, we find wonder in Close Encounters, ache in E.T., and the terror and love braided through War of the Worlds. All 3 landing because the feeling came first and the visual served it. Disclosure Day runs this equation backwards. The emotion is bolted on, dropped into scenes that haven't built up to it, and underlined by a script that keeps telling you how to feel, forced in a way no earlier Spielberg film has ever felt. When the most reliable, humane filmmaker of his generation starts manufacturing the feeling instead of finding it, you stop watching a disappointing movie and start watching something sadder. A great director doing an impression of himself. Let's hope the upcoming Western Spielberg aims to direct fares better. Because if this turns to be the last film the iconic filmmaker directs, it would be a quiet disservice to one of the great careers in American cinema, and a strange hollow note to end on.